Welcome to our Digital Opportunities webinar series. I'm Ann Byers, the Digital Equity Manager at the Nebraska Information Technology Commission, Office of the CIO. We will be meeting on most Wednesdays at 11 a.m. Central Time, starting this week and going into May or June. We will have occasional bi-weeks due to scheduling conflicts, and as just a heads up, our first bi-week will be on February 8th. Please put your name in the chat to help us track attendance. And then if you would like to receive information on upcoming webinars, please also put your email in the chat or email me at ann.byers@nebraska.gov. We will be recording this webinar. A copy of the slides and a link to the recording will be available on the NOTC's website. And today's webinar will focus on libraries as digital equity partners. Holly Wolt, the Library Technology Support Specialist at the Nebraska Library Commission, is working on our planning grant part-time and has done a great job organizing this webinar. So with that, I'm handing it over to Holly.
Okay, thank you, Ann, and good morning to everybody. And as usual, across the state of Nebraska, we probably have a variety of weather happening if you're on board here. So appreciate your effort to be a part of this morning. I'm going to start off and mention, Ann, one thing I did forget to do was include this resource, because I'm going to mention our last year in October, we launched a series of webinars entitled Weekly Nebraska Digital Opportunities. And our first webinar highlighted public, academic and nonprofit libraries across the state that were offering digital equity outreach programs. And I really thought that those programs highlighted were outstanding. Today, we're going to focus in a little bit different direction, which will become apparent to you in just a little bit of time. But in general, I just want to do a reminder about what libraries provide, which is the high-speed internet access. And we might need to put a little check next to that right now, but this is where we're trying to do, and especially with this grant, with the funding for the BEAD grant, to try to see if we can't increase the speed for public libraries in all communities, but in particular in our rural communities. But the library provides end user devices, specialty software applications, central meeting spaces, and are a trusted hub for information and community referrals for people across diverse backgrounds and interests. What do libraries offer? They offer expertise and resources with trained staff experience in tackling digital equity gaps, boosting literacies and digital skills needed for all individuals and communities to have the information technology capacity needed for full participation in our today's network world, and developing collections and resources relevant to local needs. And then the sustainability, flexible collaboration are offered by libraries, ranging from digital equity coalitions to state workforce development plans to telehealth collaborations that strengthen networks and support the sustainability as our technology evolves. All the assets that I mentioned above or previously with the goals are part of the goals for the IIJA, the Information Investment and Jobs Act, Internet for All program. And they can be utilized by Nebraska's upcoming outreach and community engagement strategies for our grant planning efforts. Today's presenters include two of my colleagues from the Nebraska State Library Agency, the Nebraska Library Commission, and a director from the Nebraska Regional Library System. What we're offering to share today is not necessarily pointing out a particular library and talking, well, not necessarily, but it could be included in here with one of my other presenters, but talking about what they are doing related to digital equity. We really want to talk about and let you know about the resources we offer to best meet other stakeholders of this grant's requirements for outreach and engagement opportunities, and tools that are available to integrate into stakeholders' planning process for the digital equity grant. So we're talking about our own organizations, and it's not to brag or anything, but we do offer services and we do have the capability of potentially helping other stakeholders regionally or across the state as they develop, as we work toward developing the plans. The Nebraska Library Commission, like many other stakeholders assisting with the digital equity planning grant, is preparing an asset inventory for our Nebraska public libraries. And our first presenter, Sam Shaw, is the Planning and Data Services Coordinator at the Commission, and he will begin by highlighting our statewide library data collection activities. So Sam's gonna take it away.
Thank you, Holly.
Yeah.
Anne, did you want to navigate to those slides?
I'm trying.
Ryan. My name is Sam Shaw. I'm the Planning and Data Services and LSTA Coordinator at the Library Commission. I'll just get started while Anne's navigating over there. When we talk about asset inventories, we want to look at first kind of provide an overview of Nebraska public libraries and then talk a little bit about things that we already collect. We think that we have a fairly robust data collection that we've completed year after year. And so let's see, can we make that a little bit bigger? Try and Ann. So in Nebraska, we have 271 public libraries and 19 branch locations and 7 bookmobiles. Those 19 branch locations are almost exclusively in Lincoln and Omaha. The majority of public libraries are just one single location. And the service areas vary with those libraries. When we talk about legal service area or LSA, there's a lot of acronyms that float around in the library world. LSA being one of them, or legal service area. So some of these libraries would serve typically a city or a town. Sometimes they serve multiple townships. Sometimes they serve a county or multiple locations. And so when we talk about the legal service area, that's not always just the population of the town. It sometimes can include the county, especially if the county receives funding or the library receives funding from the county. At the bottom here, 60% of the libraries in Nebraska serve populations of less than 1,000 persons. So most of our libraries we would consider rural. Only 3.3%, that's 9 libraries, serve populations more than 25,000. Again, the majority of the libraries in our state we consider serving that have that lower population service area and are mostly rural locations. So a little bit of an overview about the public library data that we already collect. Data is collected from 246 libraries annually on the Public Library Survey. That's part of a national data collection program that's implemented by the Institute of Museum and Library Services, or IMLS. That's the federal library agency. And if you'll notice that 246 number is different than the 271 that I mentioned on the previous slide. The reason for that difference is that those 271 libraries, the difference between the 271 and the 246 is explained by some of those libraries don't meet the statutory definition. We recognize them as public libraries, but they might not meet the statutory definition of a public library. And so that's why we don't collect data from those libraries. Looks like we lost our slides, Anne.
Okay, yeah, I'm trying to.
Can you enable screen share for all participants so we can pull it up on his own screen?
Yeah, that might be.
The problem with
Okay. You should be able to share, and I can also try to share it again.
The problem is my slides are on my remote side and I'm not on the remote side right now because the audio doesn't work. So maybe I could just, maybe I
Okay,
could
here,
just
let
keep
me,
talking here.
here we go. Is that,
Oh yeah, that's good.
is it advancing on the right slide?
No, sorry. But I can just talk off this the slides on the other side here. So Nebraska's current data collection cycle runs from, it is currently undergoing. We're currently collecting public library survey data. Our cycle runs mid-November through mid-February is when we collect the data. And then there's a cleanup phase, and we usually try and publish our data annually around April and May. All of our data is publicly available on our website, and there's a link to that that I can provide that's in the slides later on. So the survey collects data on a wide range of topics, including revenue, expenditures, library collections, the things that are in the library collection that the library circulates or has available, library services, technology, and staffing. Some of the advantages to collecting these data is that we have years of data that's collected on these topics and can be used for comparative purposes. The disadvantages are that the details are sometimes lacking. In other words, we might collect data about the number of programs that library provides, but we don't collect data about the types of programs that were provided. We collect data about the age groups that are focused, the programs that are focused on certain age groups or age categories, but not specifically what those programs did. So that's one disadvantage to the public library survey. We collect data on programs for breakdowns of age group of pre-K, children's, young adult, and then we have a general interest category. For technology, we collect data on Wi-Fi availability, internet speed, the ISP, the number of internet computers that the library provides. Sometimes these are hardwired computers. Other times we're seeing a shift from the hardwired computer lab to libraries checking out laptops for use in the library or Chromebooks for use in the library or to circulate to the public. And then this year we started collecting data just this year on public meeting room use. We hadn't collected that in the past, but we think that's important to start collecting this year. So we started collecting that. We also collect information about makerspaces. Does the library have a makerspace? And then specifically, what things are in the makerspace. Amanda will talk in a little bit, and that's kind of her area. But we collect data like, say, for instance, we have a check mark for, does the library have a 3D printer or a laser cutter or a vinyl cutter? Kind of the typical makerspace type items, and then another category. Then we also ask for those things, does the library provide training on those makerspace items? And that could be a formal training or an informal training, a formal library program, or maybe informal one-to-one type help. I also wanted to mention that the Library Commission also received a grant from the Institute of Museum and Library Services a few years ago, called the Nebraska Library Innovation Studios grant that was hosted by 35 rural and small libraries. And there's on our website, there's a list that's more detailed where those libraries were surveyed. And we also have information about, like, say, specific makerspace items that the library might have. So whereas on the public library survey, we might collect data about, does the library have a laser cutter? As a part of this other grant, we've collected and published data about, the specific laser cutter that a library might have. So it's a little bit more detailed than what we collect on the public library survey. We're also working on a supplemental data collection. We think that we have a pretty robust data that we've collected with the public library survey as far as the asset inventory for this grant, for the planning grant, digital equity planning grant. But we're also working on a supplemental survey. We're working on that design right now, and we're expecting to start data collection sometime soon to try and correspond it with the public library survey data collection that's currently underway. And those questions will focus more on more detailed than the PLS, public library survey. So examples of that would be like specific internet connected devices provided by the library. So on the public library survey, we might collect the total number. For this supplemental survey, we might look at, the age of the equipment, the type of devices that are offered, whether or not they circulate to the public, things like that. That would probably lead us to a little bit more information about the specific needs of the community that's served. Does that community have more of a need now for devices that circulate to the community as opposed to, persons coming into the library to use a hardwired computer? And more detailed program information about what libraries are providing. And so in the slides, there's a link to the data that we do publish. If you want to look at that, we have years of data. I think going back to 2008, and then prior to that, we actually have paper reports, so we can pull those. Occasionally, we do get requests for those where somebody wants to look at data from years and years ago, and we can pull those on paper. If anybody has any questions, feel free to ask those in the chat box. Otherwise, I'll turn it over to, I think Denise Harders is next.
Am I muted, or can you hear me?
We can hear you, yes.
Okay,
Yes.
great. This is Holly. I wanted to just mention, as Sam's talking, I've relied on that data related to some of the projects I've worked on related to internet speed for libraries, sorting through and finding out, which we do anyway, just benchmark for annually for if to know what speeds, if they've increased, or where's the break off for the number of libraries that we really need to focus on. And I wonder, Sam, if this would be possible, if not so much that they want to have that full amount of information, but if we had another stakeholder that was looking at coming into a community or looking at a regional area and wanted to specifically, know that they had at least a minimum amount of internet speed, and that there was a meeting room, if we could assist with some of that as through this year, as the stakeholders are looking to work through the planning portion of the grant, and they need a facility to work with.
Yes, absolutely. So we published the link that's in the slides is a link to a massive Excel file where we publish all of our data. I often get requests from all kinds of different people. These could be libraries that maybe are looking at comparing themselves to another library of a similar size, or it could be somebody else that's looking at our data. If you need any assistance, I can always pull customized data sets because I work with it all the time. Like if you were just looking for, say, libraries within a certain legal service area, say that was a population of 1,000 to 2,500, for instance, I can pull that data set and send it. Just on those service measures, for instance, like for internet speed, if that's what you're looking at, or the ISP, or the type of internet connection. So, the data is out there if you want to go ahead and pull it on your own. But if you want a customized data set, I'd be happy to go ahead and put that together and send to you. Just send me an email or give me a phone call. And I can usually turn those around pretty fast.
there any more questions for Sam? Otherwise, I'd like to do a little introduction for our next presenter. So no more questions. Well, our next presenter is Denise Harders, and she's the director of the Central Plains Library System. And she's representing her other colleagues and giving an overview of what they do for the Nebraska Regional Systems. And that's a nonprofit organization that helps the Nebraska Library Commission meet its goals at a more localized level. And I look at the regional system directors as a liaison between the library and the commission. And I'm famous for using the expression boots on the ground, but this is truly it, because I've seen Denise in many hats, boots on the ground for the public libraries that she is responsible for in her region. So Denise, if you want to take over.
Thank you, Holly. Yeah, I would like to say a little bit about the variety of libraries. You can see that our nonprofit groups are governed by boards that represent libraries, but also citizens in the region. We constantly look for people who use libraries to help us guide us to know what kind of services people would like to have. And here at Central Plains Library System, I have public libraries that I visit, as well as public and private schools, libraries, academic libraries. I have libraries in long-term care facilities and a juvenile detention facility, and even hospital libraries. So, you know, if there's a shelf of books around, I'm likely to show up. And I wanted, if you can show the next slide, Anne, it shows the regional library systems. And CPLS has 31 counties and 71 public libraries. It seems like we focus on public libraries quite often, but that's because there isn't a lot, any other type of support for public libraries. Like the school libraries and the academic libraries have the ESU for the schools, and the academic libraries have their support as well. So we try and focus where the need is the greatest. Each system offers a variety of services. We include regular newsletters, and we have communication through email lists, so we can reach all the libraries pretty quickly. We have meetings of library staff members and continuing education through workshops, and we do professional consulting and planning if there's any questions that folks have. A lot of times in a public library, that when the person first gets hired, they may not have any library background. So and there's so many things that need to be done, like Holly said, for the commission, that we try and help them with those forms that are needed by the state, and like the public library survey that Sam is so great at, he's able to explain it to everyone so well. So on the next slide, it shows the 4 system directors and where our main offices are. I'm in Hastings. Scott is in Lincoln, and he has the Lincoln area and the southeast part of the state. Tammy has the Omaha area in her system, plus the northeast part of the state. And Cindy's out west, the Panhandle, plus a few other counties that come into the state here. And we have, it's not a huge organization when we talk about a nonprofit group. Each system has a director and very limited support staff. Like I have 2 part-time assistants. Some, like out in the western part, Cindy just has 1 part-time assistant. So we do wear a lot of hats. The next slide, I wrote 270 public libraries. Sam says it's 271, so I believe him. It just depends on what you count as a library. The Nebraska Library Commission does collect all that data, and it is available on the internet. And so actually I set up this picture as a link to that interactive map. When you get to that out on the internet and if you're looking to know if there's a public library somewhere and you want to have a meeting there, you can click on any of these little flags and it will tell you, you'll see a picture of the library. It'll tell you how large the town is. If we start collecting the data about whether or not there's a meeting room and what that meeting room will hold, something that might be unexpected could pop up. Like there's a new library in Elwood that's south of Lexington. It's a real small town, about 750 people, but they have a beautiful new library and they have a meeting room that will seat 12 to 15 people comfortably. So if you needed to meet in that area, that's a terrific spot to go. Again, you might not think of Elwood, but when we get this data on the map, you'll be able to find those meeting rooms. Okay, the next slide shows that when COVID hit, I'm telling you, it highlighted those digital differences because everybody had their kids at home and they maybe didn't have a way of doing school, and libraries, a lot of them did close, and we considered all types of services, many of them high tech. We used Reader Zone, which is an online record keeping program for that first summer reading program, and it's caught on. We use it now all the time. The commission provides that for every library in the state. And a lot of the public libraries did story time on Facebook. The publishing companies allowed, through their copyright rules, to allow us to do story time on Facebook. Most of the time that isn't allowed. There's Zoom book club meetings, and which is entirely different than it was pre-COVID. And a lot of our libraries have gotten involved in the Nebraska Overdrive Libraries Consortium that allows their patrons to check out ebooks and e-audiobooks. And we have 191 libraries that are participating in that particular program right now, which is a really great number when you look at overall libraries. Something that was considered was lending out hotspots. You know, that was the first thing. We just immediately thought, let's get hotspots out there. Let's get laptops out there. We need to do something. But the problem was the hotspots weren't available. Number one, we couldn't buy them. People looked everywhere and they weren't available. And then you run into things like a lot of those small libraries out there only have one part-time staff member. They might only, and then that one part-time staff member has to figure out how to troubleshoot this equipment. If they lend out 5 or 10 hotspots and it comes back and it's been, every button on it's been pushed, you know, when it goes out to the public, you never know what's going to happen to it. So you have to be careful and you have to know how to troubleshoot the problems, because they bring it back to you and say, hey, why isn't this working? The cost of replacements for the stuff that doesn't show up again. And then a really big concern, you know, our first instinct is we got to serve, we got to get this stuff out there. But then, and there were grants, we could buy this stuff, we could pay the service for a year, but then that cost of service sustainability is what was running in people's minds is, hey, we can't, if we start this, they're going to want to keep it going. So how do we sustain that service? So, you know, there's, we did low-tech stuff too, you know, the curbside pickup and the craft in a bag. That's all stuff that is still going because people love it, just like they love picking up their groceries at Walmart. So there's services are one of those things that libraries are always thinking is how we can do this better. So the next slide has the ongoing considerations that we are looking at as libraries going forward. Of course, our first thought is for senior citizens. They need computer assistance. They need help doing, we're still not, the digital natives are not elderly yet. So the elderly population needs help because They need to fill out their social security paperwork. They need to visit the doctor, and it's a telehealth thing, and they're not sure what to do with that. They need financial advisors and tax preparers. And a lot of those are Zoom meetings, and they say, Zoom what? And so they come into the public library, and that the first person they see, their librarian, they trust the librarian. That's a real great thing, is the trust that people have in their library staff members. But again, you're dealing with people's finances and their health, and we're good at privacy in libraries, but it's difficult. The need for private rooms was really highlighted during this time as well. Then you have parents and grandparents who have children in both public and private schools. And I was shocked to know that my 3rd grade granddaughter does not have a social studies book. Everything to do with her social studies must be accessed online. So if she has homework in social studies, they need internet at home, because that's the only way to access that book. She can't bring it home because it doesn't exist. So those kind of things, and the resources that they need to do their homework are online. And a lot of times, even turning in the assignment has to be done online. And if you want to know what days the school is regularly out, and you think you can get a school calendar, it's not going to be paper. And I'm just old enough to be amazed and horrified by all of that, but that's the way that goes, that it's not coming home in paper anymore. You have to have internet. You have to have access to it. And the people that don't have internet at home, they go to their public library and need to access it there. Both traditional and non-traditional college students are becoming online students. And if they don't have a good connection at home, because so many of those online classes include lectures and testing and all of those things, you have to have space in a public library for students. They need space without distraction. And sometimes they even need headphones. If they don't have that for themselves, the public libraries are providing that. If they don't have a study room so that they can put them in a soundproof room, then they need to provide headphones so that it's not blaring out into the library. But so it's distractions for the students and distractions for the rest of the patrons in the library. So that's one of those things that has to be considered. And that was brought up to me by one of my community college librarians when I talked about this recently with my library directors on a Zoom meeting. I asked him to give me some ideas. So, and this was a librarian from one of the community colleges that mentioned that she had a student that would come in and he never had any headphones. And that reminded me of that. Now, the next slide is my last one, and it shows some of the innovative programming that's going on in libraries already. Individual instruction for using the computer is daily. You can't schedule a class and to teach people the beginning stages of using the computer, because people get lost in that. It's just not possible to teach it that way. So individual instruction, one-on-one, that's the way we do it, one person at a time. Wilson Public Library and Cozad during 2020, early in 2020, were recognized. That library was recognized with a Spotlight Award from our national organization, the American Library Association and the Public Library Association. They were part of an initiative called Libraries Lead with Digital Skills, and they did a whole series of programming with businesses about how to use the internet to know who their patrons are, to how to get them in the door. Excuse me. And like I say, it was a program that was recognized by ALA. And I know that Amanda's going to talk about makerspaces, but I was going to mention the Grand Island Public Library has a a partnership with the Central Community College in Grand Island, and they did an extended learning program to get people in the door of the library. And it came through CCC. People were comfortable signing up because they know that CCC has these great activities. And so they sign up and then they get into the public library and learn all about how to run makerspaces, equipment. And the Ravenna Public Library also, that's a small library. You might not think of Ravenna as having very much, but they have a permanent makerspace and it is well appointed. You can see there a laser cutter, a vinyl cutter and plotter, a heat press, a quilt pattern cutting machine, along with sewing machines and embroidery machines. And so they have classes all the time. A lot of them are individual instruction again. And one library grant that I do want to mention, ALA has a program called Libraries Transform Communities. And the focus for this year's grants is on accessibility in public libraries. And it's all types of accessibility, not just being able to get in the door, but that's one of them, is having those doors that will open so people can get in, and all other types of accessibility needs. So that's a great grant that's going on right now. We've had several libraries in even my system in the central part of the state. Ravenna is talking about food insecurity, and they put in a whole raised bed garden for the last 2 summers. They've raised tons of produce. And Valentine, up in the northern part of the state, is fighting the trafficking of young people. And that has led them to be partners with law enforcement and the school district. So libraries know how to be partners and help out where they can. And I should have put in a slide with my contact information. I'm sorry I didn't do that. But I am at Central Plains Library System. So if anybody has any questions, let me know what I can do.
Well, I see that Josh has a lot of questions, and let me see if I can get to. Josh, I'm clicking ask to unmute, so I think.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Pardon me. Yeah, it's not really so much a question as it really is a recommendation. As part of our work with the Digital Equity Planning Grant, for our region, we're trying to spread around our meetings so our stakeholders kind of are spreading the cost of being a part of it, right? And make it convenient by spreading it around and showing them some of the options that are out there. One of which we were looking at a public library in Hastings, which has a beautiful website. I've not personally been to the library, but I know that people speak very highly of it and its makerspace. People in Hastings are very proud of it. And I was like, thrilled that there was a digital reservation form, and when I went there and looked at all of the offerings, you could reserve pretty much anything they had available in their makerspace. You could reserve, select any of their meeting rooms. But having never been to the Hastings Public Library, I have no idea what that space looks like. I have no idea how many people the rooms can hold. I don't know what technology is offered in those rooms. I don't have any baseline for what it could potentially look like, because I know the public library in Kearney looks drastically different than the one in Grand Island and Ravenna and Hastings and everything else. And so it would be really interesting to me from the Nebraska Library Commission standpoint, those of you that are leaders, if this is something that could be looked at as a funding opportunity, is the programming that you see it all the time now with realtors, that they do those walking tours, the video walking tours, where you can pop up when you enter into a different room, and it can give you a little blurb about what's available in that room, or what, the dimensions of the room, if it's from a realtor standpoint or whatever, would just be, adding to the functionality of an online reservation. And somebody, I think it was Alan or Sam, responded to my comment in the chat box about this being also a high need for rural libraries so that they could demonstrate to surrounding areas. Maybe they're the only public library in a county, and people are traveling from a distance to get there. And so people can go on and see exactly what a room looks like if they're looking for a meeting space or what their maker space might contain, and do an online reservation and things like that. It would just be a huge step up. And as we talk about digital equity and enabling people to have greater access to resources that exist for them, even less tech savvy folks like you were talking about, Sam, some of the older, and Denise, the older folks that are struggling to find those meeting spaces for telehealth needs and tax needs and those types of things. The library is kind of a natural fit. And so maybe it's not directly going to be that population, but maybe it's, the entities working with them. Maybe it is a tax preparer who is reserving a space and they're looking at your public library to say, well, what can I utilize in this space? So it was really more just a suggestion. I think the value add long-term for all of our libraries would be tremendous. We've already had some of those conversations with telehealth. What would it look like for a library to have we have some very nice at the Kearney Public Library. We have some very nice study rooms, but you can hear people in the room next to you, if they're on a Zoom call, it comes through. And so if we could have some soundproofing and some extra care put into that, where you're talking about very personal, confidential information, how could a library better position themselves to help older people that maybe need a little bit more privacy, or anybody for that matter, for a telehealth call, or, mental health, meeting that they might be having, or tax preparation or anything like that, where very sensitive information might be being shared. A library is a great safe space because they feel safe there. But if the facility is not set up for it, then you could be making a vulnerable population that much more vulnerable.
I want to mention, Josh, that actually the Library Commission and the OCIO have already made a first attempt at this type of a grant that you're talking, funding for this type of addition to libraries. And we see it as a need also, and we will continue to pursue it.
Wonderful.
And I can talk about, so right now for the walking tours that you were talking about, I actually do offer a 360 camera available for checkout through the Library Commission. And then I also offer cameras that libraries can check out, and they can take the video or take the static images. And most libraries have actually been taking the static images just because it's easier for them to do it, and it's easier for them to put it on their website afterward. But the only problem is marketing it and letting people know that these tools are available to them. And then also kind of overcoming that technophobia that says oh my God, it's a 360 camera. I can't use one of those. What am I going to do with that? I need a 360 video, but I can't. So it's helping people kind of navigate that understanding. Just because the technology is available and accessible, one thing in the way that you were framing that tells me that I should change the way that I'm marketing that camera. And if I were to just put out a little blurb that says, build a 360 walking tour, or build a video walking tour of your library, check out a camera kit, life might be easier for people. And then with a little tutorial guide of how to do it. So that's one thing that I can start doing, just walking in that direction. And when we get to my section of this whole thing, I'll be talking more about the digital skill resources and how I'm changing the way library training is happening to kind of pluck out the needs that you're talking about, because it's sort of like a supply demand situation, because libraries aren't just going to go out and create and then hope that people show up. We don't have the time, money, or availability to be able to do that. But we also don't have the insight into your specific needs to be able to know that's something that we should generate. So it's starting those conversations and building those partnerships to be able to kind of build that symbiosis is what I'll be talking about.
And you're up.
And yes, I first want to put a plug in for Denise. If anybody needs a live expert for their teams. She seems to have a lot of knowledge related to the communities and the libraries. So I thank you, Denise, for your presentation. Got a good discussion going here. And I do want to just go ahead and, in the interest of time, introduce our Amanda Sweet at the Library Commission. She's a technology innovation librarian, and she's highlighting how the Nebraska Library Commission is helping libraries understand and meet the technology needs of their communities through updated librarian training, as she was just mentioning, workshops, curated resources, and access to emerging technology kits and more. So thank you, Amanda, and take it away.
So on my screen, you should see my giant Google Drive right here. So I'll be talking about some of the resources that are made available to help broaden the digital equity resources and availability. So on here is, I actually meant to go to this course first, because the first thing that libraries and pretty much everyone needs to be able to do is basically understand what digital equity means to people, because it's become that catch-all situation that just encompasses everything. And right now I'm waiting for this link to actually load, and I don't know why it's taking so long, because it's just on the commission website. And if it doesn't load, I will just talk about it, I guess. So be it. So we're changing the way that libraries are assessing what their community actually needs. And right now, when I taught a technology basic skills class, I found out that most library staff in small rural communities were trying to understand what people needed based on asking the small handful of people that were in their inner circle. Some people just asked their actual, like their teen daughter or their teen son or their kids, or went to one classroom to find out what people needed. But that's not how it works. That's not how user experience research works. That's not what customer discoverability works. That's not how it actually works. So if this magical website were to actually load, you would see the way that I'm changing the approach to this. And I can't even get on the commission's website right now. But what I will do is put the link in the chat so you can look at it, and hopefully it'll load on your own computer. There. So it's the techniques to understand how to bracket out demographics into, say, workforce development, which branches out into entrepreneurship, innovation, and job seekers. And then you can also break it out into older adults that are trying to build their skills up. You can break it out into kids and teens. Kids and teens can further be broken down into career exploration, personal growth and development, privacy, security, and then you can also branch that out over into digital skill resources for parents trying to keep their kids safe online, parents trying to help their kids learn tech skills for life after K through 12. And there's just like all these different ways that you can bracket out these demographics and connect them over to the digital skills that they need to survive. And then I found out that, and you all probably know this, technology is moving way faster than anyone can actually keep up with it. So you have like your general standbys, which would be teaching technology skill basics and teaching people how to do all the things that they need to do, which I will pull up here. So instead of most people I found out are basically trying to reinvent the wheel. They say we need to be able to identify fake news information. We need to be able to teach people computer basics. And I found out they keep recreating the same type of thing and putting it out as though it's the first time it's ever existed on the planet. It's not. So instead, in order to get to the technology that's happening in the future, we need to be able to just get all this basic stuff out of the way. So I put together all these different resources, and just clustered them all together so libraries can either just copy and paste them onto their own website so that it's locally available to their community. When libraries have done this, they've also added and customized additional resources so that there are specific localized resources. So anyone who's on this call, if you have something that's in these general categories, a great way to promote your service is by adding it onto a page like this on the local library, because these are generic, they're general. I don't have the individual time or resources to be able to know every little thing that every little community is doing. I wish I were omniscient like that. I'm not. But that's what these pages can be customized for. So one way that this has been done, and I'll pull up Alliance Public Library as an example. No, I'm not a robot. Fine. Oh, I wonder if it's not loading because of my VPN.
I think it's
I
a
will
personal problem, as I've looked to see, so.
disconnect my VPN. And lock. So now on Alliance Public Library, they now have an entire digital skills section. So people can choose the category that they need and pick out the stuff that they actually want. And these are all pre-formatted for them, which I should have mentioned that they should disable this sidebar, otherwise the layout would actually look better, but whatever, I can send them an email. But now they can get all the resources that they need. Some libraries have been pulling off of these resources to develop additional workshops and additional services and resources. So for like a one-on-one reference interview, and some libraries just don't have the time or staff, so they just make it available to people. So now with all of this stuff out of the way, we can get over to the more advanced stuff, because people need to, and I noticed that when you were introducing yourself in the chat, most of you are from either economic development groups, community development, or some K through 12 organizations. So these are the resources that might actually be helpful for you, because these I put together for STEM, STEAM career exploration. And I'll start by opening up this artificial intelligence one. So I put together, these are basically handouts and resources that people can use in any community that shows how the careers of the future will look. And these are kind of like your big buzzword keywords that people need to build the understanding of what a team in artificial intelligence would actually look like. And then I put a QR code in the bottom right of each one of these that links over to the more specific article about how these roles actually look and work together. And then there's also more specific infographics about the team roles and the machine learning's life cycle. Because if people want to be able to understand how machine learning looks and works as a career, you need to know how it's made. You need to know the process of how it's built and what's going on the underside of it. And then there's also just some general informational stuff, and probably more about machine learning than you ever would have wanted to know, but it's out there. And so I put together one of these clusters there's some for augmented and virtual reality, and these other industry applications might be helpful too, that link over to an additional resource about how this stuff is actually used in these areas. And there's also some for Internet of Things. I've got robotics, and I think there was one more, but it may not have made it in here. Whatever, I got a bunch of them. And there's also these tech pages. So putting together the information about the basics of what this stuff is, how it's used, and if people want to be able to better understand, actually a better article for this is the new robotics page I put together. here. So in order for people of any age to be able to learn and understand and leverage this technology, they need to be able to get the most updated information about it, build a better understanding of what it is, how it's made, the teams that are required to do it, what can go horrifically wrong if it actually goes wrong, and then start following learning communities so that they can start getting the most updated information and connecting with people they can actually talk to who can help them learn it. And what I don't know is who's local, who's right near you that can actually help do all this stuff. I grabbed the stuff that was all internet based and web based that anyone anywhere can access, just because it's the easiest one catch-all pot of information to be able to put together. And also the blogs, podcasts, and associations people would want to follow to be able to build that current understanding of the trends that are ongoing in these areas. So these work together with those infographics that are, oh, drones, that was the one. So these pages work together with these infographics here so that you can use these as general catch-all handouts to start building that introductory understanding, gather that interest, and start getting people over to the careers, information, and resources that they want. And then in order to be able to experiment with it, we have tech kits. So these are the things that you can actually check out hands-on to be able to understand what all this stuff is. And one thing that I actually just got in the mail was the DataBot. So DataBot 2.0 is to introduce Internet of Things. It's basically a cute little cube that has all the sensors that you would need to be able to replicate a small smart home or introduce any sensor that would be necessary for IoT. And IoT also tracks over to artificial intelligence, like the AI machine learning, and it is AI enabled, which is cool. So now the kids that didn't I say kids, I mean, adults could actually use this too. There have been quite a few, adults, people of all ages can learn stuff from this just because these tech concepts are so new. I'm a big kid now and I still learned a lot from it. But even going through these lesson plans and activities for anyone, you can learn stuff. And so anyone, any community library, can check this out. So libraries can partner with your local organization to be able to help people understand what this stuff is. And there's stuff to help you understand all those concepts that I just talked about right there. And so pretty much anything on this list, AI, IoT, robotics, drones, VR, AR, there is a corresponding kit and a corresponding information page and corresponding infographic cluster that helps you understand it, learn it, use it, leverage it, turn it into a career or a solution to your community problem. And how long have I been talking? I have a few other things, but I can skip them if there's not a lot of time.
I think you were talking for about 15 minutes, which we did have a little more time allotted for you. I don't know. Anne will be the one that can make a decision related to that. Let me continue on. It's fascinating.
So I can also pause for any questions if there were any that popped in.
Yeah. I think Josh and Alan have been making a lot of comments in the chat, so they might have something. Alan, I will unmute you too. I think Josh, you're still unmuted. Yeah, Alan, I've asked you to unmute, so if you have a question.
Maybe not.
Yeah, Josh, did you have
Sure. I was just, I guess, trying to track what you were sharing there, man. It was really interesting. And I think you kind of answered my question as far as like the modules and the information that you were talking about with AR and VR.
Yeah.
They're they're showing how they're being used in a vocational setting, and giving people skills to then be able to leverage them in a work setting. Is that correct?
And I guess one thing that I was missing from here is that each one of these segments, if you go to the learn more, there's also try it in the library. So there's a collection of curated activities that you can grab from. So whether you're a library, economic development group, vocational rehab group, career exploration group, you can grab from one of these resources to be able to introduce it to your community. And then there's been a variety of ways that libraries have started the conversation surrounding this. Some of them use this technology specifically for career exploration. So they might choose one of these activities, say how to build a chatbot. They go through the step-by-step activity, and then they hand out one of the packets, these little resource packets about the artificial intelligence. And then they start a conversation and then start asking students or people of any age, what is your current interest or skill level? Where do you see yourself in AI? And where do you see this impacting the industry that you're interested in right now? Where do you see it impacting the job you have right now? And how could you see yourself transitioning from where you're at right now into one of these roles here? And if you were to look at the full and entire life cycle of AI and these team roles, even the areas that are not specifically an app developer or like a data scientist, how is the role of a business analyst or a manufacturing, like a manufacturing manager or a warehouse manager, how are they being affected in these changing team roles? And how are you going to adjust in that? And just starting that conversation and opening up that, getting people thinking about it. Because even if, like in the state of Nebraska right now, they recently did like a massive survey of the manufacturing centers to find out how saturated automation has been. And it was only about 40% saturated. So even though manufacturing is one of the top industries in Nebraska, automation hasn't hit everywhere in the way it's going to yet. So, but it's going to. Otherwise, yeah.
Sorry, is the Library Commission anticipating their role in offering this type of digital literacy around AR and VR, which should potentially be on the rise? The way the tech industry is presenting it is that AR and VR is going to be the next, and in most other parts of the country is already sweeping industrial segments of our society. But do you see libraries playing a bigger role in supporting this as a skills gap for maybe underemployed persons, or how? I mean, because we all know that most libraries are understaffed and don't have really the staff to handle general digital literacy. How do you see people coming into a library saying, hey, I want to learn about AR, VR stuff. What do you guys have to offer? And then you sit them down at a computer and they just go through a bunch of modules. Is that the extent of it? Like, what do you see this? How do you see this progressing?
Some have, so in order to actually make it happen, most have been working with local volunteers, local schools, or partner agencies. So some of them brought in guest speakers to be able to help open that conversation. Some of them are super lucky and they can actually contract with a like STEM organization to be able to bring in like a facilitator who's more trained in being able to hold that conversation. One example would be like that AIM group. I can't remember what the actual full name of it is, but I can look it up. And AIM actually works primarily with K through 12. But, oh, here it is. So AIM has their own portal of career exploration resources. And I know that there's other organizations across the state that are working on similar things. Like I know Prairie STEM's doing a whole lot of it. And there's like, so it's partnering with those other outside organizations. So the library might be providing access to the tools and resources and access to the curated information resources. But the partner organizations might be providing the specific, more skilled information and the facilitation of actual activities. And then it's more of like a helping libraries work through the workflow of what it would take to be able to help people build an understanding of that technology and refer them to the correct organization that would be able to get them where they want to go. Because no organization on the planet is going to actually be able to know all the things at all the time, because that's just not how people work. But people work in ecosystems. So one of my focuses is ecosystem mapping, because I want to be able to know who in Nebraska and who across the nation is working in these little clusters of technology, or these clusters of industry, or these clusters of who is solving the problems of poverty, who's solving the problems of the supply chain crisis, who are the organizations involved, how are they working together, and how can you help people with wayfinding to be able to make their way through those ecosystems. And there's also like the
Hi, Amanda.
Yeah.
Hi, this is Alan. Sorry I couldn't unmute earlier. I was actually trying to get off of a different call that was previously scheduled. But what you're sharing is a perfect segue into what it is that we Prairie STEM have been trying to do, which is very similar to what you were describing with AIM Institute. But what we're doing with our libraries in the schools is using them as a means to expose all of these new technologies in STEM and STEAM exactly to those students through the teachers, where we work with professional development in the schools to get the teachers up to speed on everything that you're talking about. And then using things like STEM nights to expose the parents of those students so they get a better understanding of why we need to support these in-school and after-school activities in STEM. And to the extent that Josh was talking about bringing technology into it, I couldn't agree more with his suggestions, as well as everything that you're trying to do in the ecosystem side of things.
Awesome. And Alan, I think, did you show me a robot dog?
We did.
Yes.
So we have
We should talk about
our robot dog is Bingo, and Bingo is probably the culmination of all things robotics. And it is what we bring into schools, to community events, to the libraries, to really try to engage people and get them to ask questions and show them that all of our services and programs geared towards kindergartners to 12th graders can lead up into being able to program, create, develop their own robotic dog, cat, horse, you name it. And because of Bingo the dog, we're able to get students to then come in and learn things about physics, to learn things about engineering, to learn all of the subsequent fields in STEM and STEAM, so that the robotic dog becomes kind of that guiding light for them as they start navigating their, and understanding their value in academics and why they need to focus on math and science and reading and art.
I love hearing when people are doing the same things as me. It's great.
Well, and so I appreciate everything you're doing. The commission is doing amazing work in trying to bridge all of these gaps. I feel that for so long, libraries, especially in rural areas, have been their own silos. And now with, what you're doing, what everybody else on this call is doing, it's really kind of cutting edge in terms of being able to leverage those assets that one community may have, but is not available in another community. And, whether it's through these 360 virtual tours or connecting through Oculus headsets or using Zoom to do professional development, to teach robotics. You know, we provide, we're now using Lego robotics, Sphero robotics, robotic dogs, really all across the state to try to get students interested in, you know, what we have helped support and sponsor with the new Heartland Robotics Initiative. So that next year, as all of these kids are coming on, there's a continuum, not a one and done type event, so that these kids can learn robotics as, you know, before they can even read and write early in K through 2. When they get from 3 through 5, they can start learning how to do drag and drop programming. When they get 6 through 8, they're actually learning line coding all the way up to Python. And then when they're in high school, they're actually taking everything they learned and applying it to innovation challenges that we provide for them.
I like that. And I have a new resource to promote.
Well, yeah. Everything that we're doing is really trying to do what you've already envisioned. And so I would be happy to talk offline at any point. I think that the work that's being done now is something that we need to not just share amongst ourselves, but we're actively trying to get the word to the community, meaning the parents, you know, through all of our outreach. We do dozens of community outreach events throughout the year where we actually go and talk to parents and get their buy-in and support for why they need to bring their kids to the makerspace, why they need to bring their kids to the library, why they need to understand for themselves these digital tools that are the pipeline for success for their kids.
And did you put your email in the, I think I already have your email, but did you put it in the chat?
I have yours, but yeah, I'll go ahead and put it in the chat, no problem.
I don't want to bore everyone with picking out like a day and time to meet because no one wants to hear that. But
If I could, I would invite everybody to our office, our location, to see all the things we're doing and how there are intersection points with everything that you've just mentioned, how there's intersections with what Josh was talking about, how everything that Anne is bringing to the table through this event itself is something that we are actively trying to work with school libraries. And on the call is also Shauna Silvius and what she's doing with MAPPA and trying to connect everybody and get all of these solutions that, you know, are out in the wild, so to speak, and congealing them into an actionable plan. She's done an amazing job of bringing Tom Rolfs from the Nebraska Broadband Initiatives, you know, myself, and all of these city planners together so that we can all basically work together to try to attack this problem.
I like it.
Yeah.
Nice.
So, yeah, we may be in touch with you. We'll probably be in touch with you, Alan, about maybe seeing if we can have you on a webinar, a future webinar, or if we can arrange a visit, that would be great. It's about 12:15, so I think we're going to have to start wrapping up. Are there any final questions before we wrap up? And then I'd also like to thank all the speakers. Holly, did you want to make any comments before we close up?
No, I just appreciate the discussion today and the presenters and for you monitoring and taking care of us all for the hour and 15 minutes, and really look forward to more of these webinars. This is very interesting.
Yes, so thank you, everyone. Thank you for the discussion. Sorry about the technical difficulties earlier on. Some days are a little more challenging than others. So I just want to give you mention that next week's webinar is on older adults and resources for helping older adults use technology. And then on February 1st, we'll have a webinar on benchmark data, and which isn't maybe that exciting, but I think it's probably important to go over that early on. And then also precision ag, and I think that will be more interesting. And we'll probably let our precision ag speaker, Don Lundquist, go first, so that we leave plenty of time for him. And February 15th, we'll be discussing digital devices, and we'll have Brian Whitaker from Oklahoma State University. He just did a really good report on rural device access. And Beverly Lallam Taylor from the Digital Express at Metropolitan Community College. And they have a really great program for repairing devices, along with a lot of other services to the North Omaha campus, through the North Omaha campus of Metropolitan Community College. So just to give you a heads up on some of the upcoming webinars. So thank you, everybody. So everybody have a great day. Stay safe and warm.
You too.